so now we've got this event. What happens? Can I type in this? What happens when you try to type in a box? Why is that happening? Because what's an empty string? Right here, right? We've cemented this so that it cannot change ever. So that's not great. So what would make more sense here? Yep, we need to have a value here because we want a controlled input. What should our value reflect? No. Doug? Yes. Right, our value needs to reflect our state. So we'll say this dot state dot first name, which is currently still an empty string, mind you. Okay, and it's still not going to work because we're not doing anything in our handle change. So let's go ahead and handle our change. So what do I put in here?
This dot set state.
Okay, so what does this dot set state do?
It keys into the state.
Okay, so it updates the state, and then what else does that do? What is the point of set state?
To keep code pure.
Okay, yeah, so it does give us back a new state. But what's the result of that? What also happens? So it causes a re-render. Oh, nice. Sorry. Right? That's the whole point of set state. Is it updates state and causes a re-render so that we can change the way things appear on the screen. So it's integral. Okay, so set state is a method that we're getting as part of React, right? And what arguments, if any, does set state take? Kevin, what? Can't hear you. Okay, so what do you mean by that? Tell me more. Which argument? Okay, so like this. And what's the other arguments? Okay. And then what else? Okay. Well, we're partially right here. What else? What other ideas do we have? Yeah, Henry? What's it take? An object. Mm-hmm. It's okay. I'm just asking for the types of arguments. The two types of arguments. Okay, object is one argument. Okay, so in set state, we can pass in an object. Okay, so let's find out what do we need to know about this object. What information will this object be?
Sequence, a sequence.
Okay, so set state is a sequence.
value of the key returns here?
Yep. Perfect, right? So this is going to take the key or key or keys and value or values that should change. Right? So you can overwrite multiple things at once if you wanted to. You can also add new keys technically into the state, the value. Okay, what is the other argument that I can pass to set state? Now you were hinting more at it. Yeah, Doug? A callback. Okay. Kevin, what are the arguments that the callback takes? Yeah, and previous state. Nice. So callback its arguments take in the previous state and props. What does the callback need to return? Yep, or at least parts of it. Returns this stuff. Same thing. It returns an object with the same key values that should change. So when should you use a callback versus when should you use an object? Yeah, Doug?
I think you use a callback if it has like a child or something.
Good guess, not quite. Any other guesses there? Yeah, Calvin?
Use object or you're trying to keep track of multiple things.
Also a good guess, not quite what we're looking for. Well, think about what the callback does differently than the object, and maybe you'll have a better guess. Let's see if we can come to it together. What does the callback do differently? It has arguments, right? The callback takes in two arguments that the other one doesn't take. So when might you want to use a callback instead of just the object? So these arguments you automatically get. But I like where you're going, right? So you automatically will get previous state and props. But when would you actually want to use the callback? The callback is a function. Yeah. So we're really close. We're just not quite hitting it.
So, with the callback, would you just be returning something that you're not changing?
You're returning the object still. Henry?
Is it when the state is being updated?
We're updating the state on both of these. So, yeah, Calvin?
Is it when you're creating an object versus when you're returning the previous state?
Not quite. So it's when you're updating something and you're using the previous state as part of your calculation. So if you're ever needing to refer to the state as it currently is inside of here, like this dot state, like dot count plus 1, you would have to use this dot previous state. dot count plus y. So when we did our clicker on Wednesday, right, we did this dot state dot count plus 1. Do we remember that? So that wording, this dot state plus 1 dot count, that implies we're using the current state to make the next change. So because we're using the current state to make that change, we want to use the callback and call that the previous state. In this example, when we're doing first name, will we be using the current state? Will we need to reference the state as it is right now? No. So should I use the callback or should I use just the option? Or the object? Yeah. Just should use the object. Okay. So the object says it takes in a key. What key is that? Okay. And the value? Perfect. All right. Does that make sense, the difference between those two? Okay. You should feel comfortable with those. So if it doesn't, revisit, ask questions, all of the above. Okay. That's yeah, the internet is going on. It's really weird. All right. So now we go and to our box here. Oops. And we get our error. Cannot read property set state of undefined. Why is this happening? Kong?
Then you press the reduce name.
Well, I think they're reading the current state. That's why it's undefined.
No, it's saying it can't call set state on undefined. Doug, what's going on here?
I guess it's prevent default.
I don't think that's it.
I think line 6 you forget the arrow.
I didn't forget. I did it on purpose, but you're right. Right? Kong's right. Kong is saying, essentially, I could use a fat arrow. I could also bind it in the constructor. Right? I could also bind it here if I wanted to. I could also say dot bind this if I wanted. But I need to keep the context around somewhere. Without the context, it breaks. But now it will work. I will do the fat arrow though, just because I like it. But binding would have also worked. Good catch, Kong. Okay. All right, so now we've got our first name, and let's keep going. Let's make our next input. Should be a little bit easier. Right, we'll just duplicate this. Everything should be last name instead. Which one?
You had the label closed, but you didn't have it.
Oh, I took this with me. Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Right, I could also do placeholders here If I wanted to as well, I could throw in a placeholder. This all works the same, right? I could say, enter your last name. Oops. It'll show as a little redundant, but it's still there. We need to go ahead and create our last name. So we should add that to our state. What should that start as? Empty string makes sense, yeah. And let's do, well, it's essentially going to be the same thing again, right? Don't need, sorry, don't need to really change much there. Just make all the first into
Corey,
last.
2 T's in the last.
Sorry?
You put 2 T's in here in the last name.
Thank you. Nice catch. So let's make sure that this is working. I'm just going to console log our state right now. My computer's been weird, so I don't really know what's going on with its debugger. So I'm just going to use this state to make sure that it's updating our state as we want. And we'll see, I'll write Corey, where's John? Lewinsky is, I think, what he calls me.
Yanks.
I think he's asleep. Oh, no. Okay. But what we're seeing that we're able to update our state. We'll never live that one down. Totally don't care though, really. Okay. So that's cool. Let's go ahead and add a agree to terms and services, right? So we said we needed that. So that's another type of input, right? So let's give that a label. Oops. This is, I'll just do agree. I'll just call it that. Input, what type is that? Checkbox. What should its value be? Does it have a value? How does checkbox work?
I think it has a built-in method. I think it's like on check or something like that, or dot checked.
Dot check or just check?
It's the form dot checked, and then I think it returns true or false, something like that.
It's something like that. Right, so I think checkboxes have a checked value. So if we can say checked. And should this be checked? Should it not be checked? Well, we shouldn't hard code it, right? What should this depend on? Not submitting. Submission is something that's going to come a little bit later.
It should depend on the state, maybe.
It should depend on the state, right? Everything is dependent on the state. So we can say this dot state dot, we'll just say agree. And we need to have some kind of listener for this one as well, right? So we can have an on change or on click or whatever it is. I think it's an on change is probably good. And we'll say this dot handle agree for now. We'll close that. This is getting kind of messy. All right, so what do we need to do now?
Create that state.
Yep, let's create that state. So we'll go up in here and we'll add an agree. What should this initialize as?
True or false?
False.
Is it true or false already?
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, it's definitely one of those, right? This one we should probably start as false, because we don't want to assume that the person agrees. And let's go ahead and make that method. So we'll say handle agree. It's going to take in the event. Well, do we need the event?
Yes.
Yes.
No, we do not because there's no.
Do we need the event?
I think so.
Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. Let's put a debug. I hope the debugger works today. Let's put a debugger in and see if we can gain more information about the event. All right. So we're here. We click agree. We hit our debugger. Beautiful. What would we want to know about our event?
Certain value.
Well, we've been using .target.value. Does that still work for us? We have on. So I guess we have on or off, maybe. Well, we didn't change it. Okay, so we could keep track of this as an on or off. Yeah, Doug?
You have like E dot bubble.
E dot
Bubble.
bubbles?
Bubble. Like bubble.
Then maybe like bubble.
Bubble.
Maybe.
What?
I think that's probably referring to, because events bubble up. It's probably just checking to see if it's bubbling. Which one? I think it's on or off. Maybe we can do like e dot target dot checked. Let's see if that works. Oh, so we can do e dot target dot checked.
Yeah, that's how we use it.
Okay, so we'll use that for now. What if I didn't care about the event? How could I do this? Let's think of another way. If I didn't care, how could I know what to flip it to? Henry? I think the bubbles is referring to whether or not the event is bubbling. Any ideas?
So since you said, no, let me know. But since you said agree as false, right? So maybe if when you get the hand to agree, if you set it as if it's like you could put like an if statement.
Okay, so Henry says we could use our previous state to flip it, essentially, right? That sounds good. So if we're using our previous state, what should our set state take? Callback. Okay, so let's do that. We'll say this dot set state takes in a callback. The two arguments that the callback takes in, Kevin. What are the two? Perfect. Prev state. I'll say, and it also takes props. In this situation, I don't care about the props, so I'm not going to use it. And we need to return a new object, right? And we will say agree is equal to not for each state dot agree. Right? We should be able to do that. Which would mean we don't need the event. Now, neither one of those is better or worse than the other. I'm just trying to make sure you get to see both ways. Both are completely fair game. Okay, so let's go ahead and get out of this debugger, and we are able to change our state, and everything looks good. Okay, pretty cool. Okay, so let's also go ahead and add our input for button. All right, we want to be able to submit this. So we'll add a button, and we'll call it type submit. And we'll say submit. And then what do we want to happen when we submit? In real life. Not in this example. What should happen?
The information
Yeah.
go to a database or something.
Yeah, right. We should make some sort of post request with the information that we've acquired, right? Okay, I agree. What should we be listening for and where?
On submit.
On submit, I like that. And where would we place that listener? On the form, right? Nice. Okay. So we'll add an on submit. And we will say this dot handle submit. So let's go ahead and add that. Should this take in the event? Should this take in the event? Why? Love it. That's right. We gotta pass in the event because we're still gonna want to prevent that default. That's gonna be the first thing that we do. And default. Now I'm not actually gonna do anything in here at the moment because there's nothing for us to really do. But I will console log our final state. Well, I'll console log an object where we would say like first name because we set it up so it's nice to go to the database. This dot state got first name, last name. This dot state dot last name. Right? We could do things like that. I'll hide the state for now. So that way we can fill in our form. So we can say query, docs, whatever, agree. Well, for some reason I didn't agree, and I hit submit, and we get query Liddell C. Right, so it's working. We're hitting our submit, and then we're printing out our final bit of information. Not bad. There's some repetition here that's maybe not so nice. So I can extrapolate that. I could also say let first name, I have to call it the same thing. Last name is equal to this state. Oops. This is a fairly common pattern you see in a lot of projects. Keeps it a little bit cleaner. And we could do the same type of stuff here as well if we wanted to, so I wouldn't have to keep writing this.state.firstName, this.state.agree. I could take everything out in the render. First name, last name. That will make life a little nicer, make the code a little bit more readable, especially here where we lost information. It's like a soccer game's going on. Okay, so that's another way to just make our code a little bit cleaner. And we'll agree and submit. Everything's cool. Mm-hmm.
In the situation where, like, if you don't put anything in the checkbox and hit submit, and you want like an error message to say like you didn't click, would that if condition go in the submit function or would it go in the render?
You wouldn't.
Like if
You wouldn't put it in a render because you wouldn't want it to show up every single time.
Let me rephrase the question. So let's say if you didn't click the checkbox, like you're not agreeing to the condition, you press submit. In a lot of applications or forms, when you hit submit, you don't click the checkbox. They'll say like it won't submit it because you didn't click on the checkbox.
Yeah. Let me try something. I'm curious if this will work. If not, we'll figure out another way. I wonder if we can just say require. Let's see if that will work. What? Because I'm inside a form, yeah. So I can still make things required if I want to.
Okay.
All right, so it's the same as the HTML, luckily. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about what else we might want. What else might we want when we're using a form? What other types of inputs might we care about? Have we used forms in any other way or other inputs? Drop down, nice. Select with options. Definitely, we might want to use that. All right, let's add a quick select. So let's say we've got a select. We'll say like label. We'll say like favorite ice cream. And we'll make a select. Can't type right now. Okay. So inside of our select, what do we usually put in there? Options, right? Okay. So we'll say option. Yeah. So let's do chocolate. What else should go in our options?
That's all.
What else should go in the option tag? A value, sure. Anything else that needs to go in there? Probably not, right? Okay, and then let's go ahead and just make a couple more. We'll say vanilla, and we'll do strawberry. Okay, seems like a good set of flavors. Now, something that we should do a little bit different in this one is we also want to keep track of this in our state as well, right? Every time we make a change, we want to update our state. So let's add a property in our state. Let's call it favorite flavor. Flavor Flav. Saw him once. I have a picture of him. With him. I have a picture with him. It was cool. Yeah, it was fine. He's on Cameo. Anyway, favorite flavor. What should the default of this be? Empty? Empty array. Do you want them to be able to select multiple flavors? Maybe. Let's not worry about that yet. So we should default it to whatever is the first, whatever we want the default value to be. Doesn't really matter. Let's say we want the default value to be chocolate.
So it'll start at chocolate, you can choose if you want to keep it down and change it to different flavors.
That's right. Our select has one other value, so another property called value that we can add in React. So for this, I'll say favorite flavor. Let's just extrapolate that on as well here. Okay. Right, so we've added, where is it? We've added just this favorite flavor value to our select bar. And we probably want to be able to account for this change as well, yes? So let's add an on change. Say this dot handle flavor change. Something somewhat descriptive. Also just make sure that everything is looking the way we're expecting it to. Okay, cool. It is. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our handle flavor change. Takes in an E. Do we want to refer to the current state when we need to? Will we need to refer to the previous state for this?
Yes,
Why?
because we're starting off with chocolate, and we want to make sure if the person wants to.
So if they change it to vanilla, do we care that it used to be chocolate? No. So if we don't care, then we're not going to refer to it. So it probably looks the same as these other ones, right? This dot set state. We'll say favorite flavor, and we'll point that to e dot target dot value. Shall we try it? And let's go back to just printing out the state every time. All right. So it's at chocolate currently. We change it to strawberry. Gets updated. Okay, everything's working. Now chocolate, I know, is the first in our select bar, and so that's why you might think that that's why it's being selected. But it's really being selected first purely because we put that as our default. This order doesn't matter. I can move it to the bottom. Chocolate is still going to be the first thing selected. It will just now be at the bottom of our option. Okay? I can't tell if you guys are just being quiet or if you're like totally lost with the select bar. Just being quiet? I know it's Sunday, but our week just started. And we have the day off tomorrow. So we gotta put in extra energy. I hope you guys still code tomorrow.
You said we don't?
There's no class tomorrow. Alright, anyway. So this is our select bar. Let's see what else we might want. We might want to use radio buttons. Right? Radio buttons.
Let's do some radio buttons.
So we can. We don't have to. Radio buttons. It's the same format as prior. Do we feel like we need to see them? Yes. All right. Let's do it. Let's just do like a yes or no type of thing. So we'll add a label that says plain pizza. Well, this should probably not be a label. Okay, and then we'll do our label of. I'm not going to do labels right now. I will. Okay, we'll say yes. This is an input. Type what? Radio. What else do our radio buttons need? It's the same as HTML. It's a radio button.
Check.
So placeholders for the input tag.
Select them, check.
Well, how does radio buttons work? What are radio buttons? I feel like we don't remember what a radio button is.
Which is a little circle.
It's a round one. Yeah. Are they by themselves or are they in groups?
So you want
How many can you select at one time? Okay. So what else do we need for a radio button? You guys have MDN, right? Just because it's like the new context, it's not part of that input itself. What else does it take?
Value.
The value? Okay. Let's say yes. What else does it take? A name, right? It needs a name because that's how we can determine that the radio buttons are all connected. So we'll say, I don't know, we'll call this pizza for now. Okay, that seems like all it really needs. Sorry. And let's go ahead and duplicate this code, but for no. No. Okay. Do they also have a checked property? I don't remember.
They do.
They do, right?
Yeah, check.
No, they can select it, not check.
Okay, because we have to keep a reference to it also. So in our state here, we will have pizza, which will just point to, well, that's the state. And we'll have pizza, which should point to yes or no. So we'll have it start as yes value, because why not? Right, you want to make your default values in your state. And so now we have to, well, let's take a look. So we've got our yes, no, but these aren't really being controlled right now. Like nothing is changing in our state. These are just being, we can still write things, if, like it allows us to write it, but it doesn't, but it's not being controlled. We want everything in our form to be dependent on the state of our state. So we don't want any like loose things that we can just change without updating the state. So there's a couple things we have to do. Let's add an on-click, or how do I like to do this? I have a good example somewhere else. Oh, right, I don't have the internet. Okay, well, I'm just going to go for it then. Okay, so I think this has a checked and not checked. So we have to have a, we'll say on, bless you. Okay, so we're going to say on change, we will fire this dot handle pizza. Whoops, why is it like? Oh, okay, sorry, it scrolled. Here we go. Handle pizza. Let's go write that function up at the top. Also, we want to check to see if it's checked. So what do I mean by that? We only want this to check if that handle pizza is there. So we want to say checked. And we'll say like pizza equal to yes. Right? So this is going to return a Boolean of true or false. And for our no, we'll do checked pizza. Oops. I think this will work. But if it doesn't, we'll debug. Pizza equal to no, which is the value here. And then let's go ahead and write that handle pizza function way up at the top. Okay, so do we care about which one of these are we doing? The top one, Henry? Why?
Because we are not dependent on the previous states or
Yeah, that's right. We're not going to look at the previous state. So we're going to say set state, and we'll say pizza is e.target.value. Hopefully that will work for us the way I want it to. Let's go test our work. Okay, so we'll refresh. It starts at yes. We can move it to no, and we see that it is changing the state and it's changing the check. We've got our agree. We can change our ice cream. Things are working as planned. Any questions on that? I know it's been a long lecture. I'm sorry. It's almost over. Does this make sense? Can we replicate this? Come Tuesday, if I ask you to build this as a warm-up, will you be able to do it in under 20 minutes? Okay, great, because that's the goal. If you can't do it a bunch of times tomorrow, and we have a lot of time today. This is the lab today, right? Okay. One final thing. So we're looking at all of these. Oops. What sucks?
What sucks?
What sucks?
It's repetitive.
It's repetitive. This sucks. Does it need to be this repetitive? No, it does not. So the way around this is we are going to give all of the things we're using for this a name property. So we've already done that on our radio buttons. We've given them the name pizza, which you'll notice is the exact same name as what we're using in our state. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for our select bar here. I'm going to give everything, I'm going to give it the name. I think I have to give these all a name. I'm going to give these all a name of whatever we're using in our state, which is favorite flavor. You got to make sure you spell it right. So, especially me. Okay, we have our last name. What should this name have? What should this be? Last name, right? It has to match up with our state. First name, what should that be? First name, yeah, exactly. The same name is first name. Notice I'm not doing with the agree, disagree, but that's because we didn't use, it's not the same function, right? Our agree, disagree was this one, which was different, right? Only these ones are all the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with these. I'm going to comment these out for now. You can delete them. And I'm going to write a handle change. I'm so used to the old way of writing this. Okay, and we have our event that comes in. And so we're going to do something that ES6 allows us to do. So we'll say this dot set state, and we can do something with our object destructuring here. So instead of just saying the name, I'll put a debugger in here. We'll see what happens. Okay. I'll put our debugger in, and I'm going to call, instead of handle first name change, we're just going to say, we called that handle change, right? And instead of last name, we'll say handle change. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to go write my name in here. We hit our debugger. And we're going to look at e.target.name. So we've got our first name here. And we also have e.target.value. So using the event, I'm able to get the key and I'm able to get the value, right? So now we just have to learn the syntax, which it's not too bad actually. It's just you have to do square brackets. You say e.target.name, and you point that to e.target.value. That's it. I know you might be tempted to do an ID instead of name. It will still work. The reason I'm doing name is because that's what I was taught. And then last year I started doing it with ID. But then this year, before teaching you guys, I reread all of the documentation, and they're doing it in name. So now I'm going with the documentation. So I would do it with name. And let's see if it still works the same for us. So we'll refresh down here. Great. Exactly. I swear to God, this computer. Is it working for you? Yes, right? Okay. Yeah, I'll try to restart this. Great. And so now we can see that we're updating there, and our state is still updating for both our first name and last name, right? So let's go ahead and update the other ones as well. So handle flavor change, handle pizza, comment those out, because those are also identical code. And so handle, this is getting very big. This is just handle change. Handle change. Right, now this is a big React component, and someday we'll go through maybe ways that we could make inputs their own components even, and kind of shorten some of this stuff. But we don't need to do that today. And so we've made some changes. Everything should still update state. Let's just check. I changed it to chocolate. That's not working. All right, let's see if these still work. Okay, this still works, and agree still works. Okay, so the chocolate's not working. The ice cream's not working. I don't know.
Oh, I know why.
Why is it
I know why.
working?
Because pizza. Go back down.
What
Checks.
happened?
No, go.
What
Oh,
This, what do you want?
oh, that's not running with your code
It's fake chocolate.
on
Making
your pizza. So when you call check, right?
The issue is with the ice cream.
Oh, no. None of that issue.
This dot handle change. Why would that?
You set a default to chocolate on the top.
Right.
Top.
No,
Oh, maybe that's.
I know that.
I think it's different because they're all one name. All one name.
Let me think about this for a second. Let's put our debugger back in there. Hopefully everything won't get complainy. You know what? I have a feeling that we don't need a name on all of those things, like what David's saying.
It's like value.
I bet we can put the name on the select bar itself.
No, but you need the name for it to be only just like one on the radio button.
This is a. I feel like we're talking about two different things. Okay, let's see if it works. If I just add it up here. Okay, so now we've just made it so the favorite flavor value is there. Okay, go to our chocolate. We hit strawberry. E.target. E.target.name. flavor, set value, strawberry, okay. Maybe it will work this time. Okay, now it works. So I didn't need to put the name on the option tag. I should have put the name on the select. That's all. I just put the name on the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay, that is everything that I really wanted to go over today. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so important takeaways. This is ES6 class components. We're using a class component because we need to use state. There's a few different ways we could do that. Even now, we can actually use functional components, but I'll show you that another time. As a state, we set up our state here. We could have put it all inside of a constructor. We don't need to do that, especially when we're using create React app. It kind of sets a lot of things up nicely for us because we don't need to bind our methods either. We've set up our state here. We've commented on all this duplicate code because it was all doing the exact same thing with its object, where it was just taking a specific key and updating it at the new target value. So we've simplified that into a handle change that does the exact same thing, but just does the eTarget.name inside of those square brackets and points to the new value. And that allows us to save quite a few lines of code, right? I mean, that's a pretty big game changer. We also talked about set state and what things need to go inside of it, right? If we're not making a reference at all to the previous state, then we can just use the object of the new key or keys and the new values/values. Otherwise, we have to do a callback if we want to refer to the previous state. If you forget, it might still work, but it's better practice to use the callback when you're referring to that previous state. And it takes in the two arguments, previous state and props. For your purposes, you'll most likely just need previous state, at least for a while. And then it just returns the object, same as what you would originally have in your set state. We created a handle submit that prevented the default. We did a little bit of destructuring from our state, and we logged it. This is what we would really be putting inside of an Axios. Of an Axios like post request, right? This is like what we send in post. Then navigate to a different page, right? That's like usually when you sign in, you go to a different page. You'll stay there. You're like, oh, great, okay. Because that'd be a horrible user experience, right? So we'll learn how to do that pretty soon. We have to master this stuff first. We had render, right? Render is the only required method in a class component. We did more of our object destructuring here. Remember this .state, I'm console logging it just so I could see it. If I were to be doing a test, I would delete this before submitting it, right? We want to keep our consoles clean. We don't want the user to actually see everything, right? We don't need the user to see our work. They can just see it with how it functions. That being said, this is something I sometimes like to do. I think your React tools can help you see the states everywhere too. We did destructuring, so we don't have to keep saying this .state dot this .state dot that. We just took it straight out of our state. We had a form. Our form still has our handle submit. We had a couple of inputs, excuse me, that listened for a handle change. We gave them the name value so that we could duplicate all of that set state higher up. Right? These are what type of inputs? Controlled input. I saw somebody. Right. These are controlled inputs. That means we are really controlling what's inside of them. Right. This is different than when we were doing the DOM, where users would type in and we weren't keeping track of anything. And then when they hit submit, we just grab what was ever there. React's common practice, way more common practice, is to use controlled inputs. So the input reflects exactly what's in state, and state is keeping track of exactly what's in our input. There are things to this, like you could think of like things where you close your app and then you open it up and things are still there, right? So maybe like before it closed, it sent out a request to keep it updated or stored it somewhere, right? Okay, and we've got our input there. We also talked about favorite flavors of ice cream. We did our selects, a few option tags, right? We have the on change on the select. We have the name we found out must be on the select. And we have the value. The value is also on the select. I'm sure there are ways to also do like disabled and things like that. I definitely encourage you to keep looking into those. Not teaching that at the moment. That's not the number one priority. We've got our radio buttons where we're just doing like, hey, is this checked by checking if pizza is a yes or a no in our state. Right? Remember, this returns a Boolean true or false. It's also got its handle change. The no is the same, and then we had our checkbox. Right? Checkboxes you could think of. Right? A lot of checkboxes usually like you can select more than one thing, so you could store all of those potentially in your state, for each checkbox. So like your toppings, pepperoni, pineapple, right? And someone could just check through it. We added required to that. That works the same as HTML, so things are required. And then we had our submit button at the bottom. That's everything. Any questions at all? All right, great. So we will post pairs to John, Jenny. All right, well, we'll post pairs, and you'll have the lab for probably the rest of the day. All right, we'll see how it goes by the end of the day.